Hey guys, what's going on? It's Steve with thesalessyndicate.com. On today's video, we are going to talk about the 7 most common things as a coach or consultant that you're going to come up against that you need to address before you get down to the close in order to increase your closing ratio. So let's hop into it, guys. Okay, so number 1 would be timing. Now, the reason why timing is so important to people is because it comes down to a couple different things. 1, how long have they actually had the current problem that they're dealing with, and how long have they been wanting to get this problem solved? It's super important to understand that, because if this is a recent problem, you have to get clarity around the urgency of why they want to get the problem taken care of. And secondly, when it comes to if somebody has had this problem for a long time, you need to get absolute clarity as to why they haven't been able to actually solve that problem so far. And the second thing is you have to get clarity around how long they've had this problem. Because if they've had a problem for a really long time, you need to get absolute clarity as to why they haven't been able to solve that problem so far on their own. So regardless of what kind of product or service that you're actually selling, let's say you're selling digital marketing, agency services or life coaching or whatever it may be, getting some absolute clarity as to what they've actually tried before in the past and what's prevented them from solving it, especially if it's been something they've been dealing with for a very long time. So as an example, in their business, let's say they've had lead generation issues for 3 years and they haven't been able to figure it out up to this point. Well, there's a couple things that are probably going through that person's mind. They've probably tried a handful of different things before in the past to solve that problem. They've probably invested into other coaching or consulting before, and for whatever reason, it's actually failed. So you need to help them to identify, did that failure have more to do with them? Did it have to do with what they've tried? Did it have to do with their own mindset? So understanding timing is super important. The length of time in which they've been trying to solve the particular problem that your service or product actually offers, and the length of time, and as well as like the urgency around why they want to be able to solve that problem now. If the prospect hasn't come to the conclusion that they're in a framework of being able to solve that problem right now in their life, or there's anything timing wise that would prevent them, they're not going to move forward, and it ends up becoming a bigger objection towards the end when you're asking them to move forward with the actual purchase. So it's super important that you address this up front inside of your sales process to ensure that mentally they've committed to actually doing something about it now. And number 2, they actually believe that they can solve the particular problem. And they also recognize that any other kind of timing blocks, everybody has issues, everybody's busy, that if they're going to get this problem solved, they've got to take ownership and actually do it. That takes you confronting and addressing the time concerns up front inside of your sales process. Typically, I like to do that inside of the find out stage, as well as when I've actually gone over their goals and really understanding the destination of what they're wanting to accomplish. So timing, number 1, is super important. Okay, number 2, the affordability, the money component. A lot of times people don't realize that you can get a very clear idea whether or not the person has the financial ability to purchase your services or products before you ever get into the closing. As an example, when selling agency services, I work with an organization where we sell agency services. And some of those services, we work with companies that are spending $80 to $100 to $1 million a month online, and being able to pay for our service is obviously critical. So I address budget, I address their financial situation, I address what they're paying other agencies, I address what their current staff is actually charging them, so that I can get a better idea, and I'm upfront about rough budget so that prior to even getting down to the end of the close, I know whether or not they have the financial ability to actually purchase our services. And second of all, if you're selling some sort of coaching or consulting, understanding their financial situation by understanding where they're at in life, this is all done inside of the find out section. Knowing what their goals are, understanding better about their current financial situation, asking strategic questions will actually give you in-depth information about their financial ability to purchase their product. and allow you to be able to provide a service or product that actually works best for not only your business, but also for the prospect as well. So money you have to address prior to getting down to the end of the close. Third thing that we're going to talk about is the decision makers, making sure that the people that are actually a part of the decision-making process are a part of the decision-making processes. So especially for coaching or consulting, you'll get this down at the end of the call where it comes to, well, I've got to talk to my partner or I've got to talk to my wife. You should never get that objection because that needs to be handled at the very beginning of the conversation, and it's super simple and easy to be able to do. Especially if you're marketing and advertising any kind of business that's transformational. If there's somebody else that's involved in the decision-making process, you simply want to be able to help that person to be in the best possible situation to succeed inside of obviously the process. So if I find out that there's another decision maker a part of the actual process, I simply explain to them that we work with people that we can put them in the best possible situation. And if there's other people that are a part of this, we want the person to be able to succeed, and we want to have that support by the individual that they need to have that decision-making, process with. So I'll actually make sure that they reschedule and get that other decision maker on the phone with me so that I can go through the process with both of them, rather than going through a full entire presentation and getting down to the end for them just to go ahead and say, well, I've got to go talk to my partner. Now that puts you in a situation where you're actually chasing the prospect, following up, hoping that they actually close, versus putting yourself in the best statistical situation to be able to go through the process, get down to the end, and make it simple and easy for the prospect to purchase. You have to address that up front as a potential objection, as more of an obstacle. Okay, so the fourth thing that I'm gonna say is probably one of the other bigger objections that you're gonna potentially get, or an obstacle at least at this point, because once again, obstacles are things that happen, they're potential objections beforehand. These are things that you're confronting the prospect on. So number 4 is unsure that the product or service will actually help them, or they're unclear as to your product or service being able to solve their particular problem. So there's a couple different ways to be able to address this. Oftentimes this has to do with limiting belief, that they've tried so many different things from a timing standpoint, and they just haven't been able to create the success that they are looking for with either their life or their business, or regardless of the product or service that you're offering, they're unsure, or they have limiting beliefs that this destination of success, whatever that looks like, is actually doable. So you have to address that inside of your sales process, especially at the beginning, inside of the find out. They have to have buy-in that the problem is actually solvable, that they've seen enough social proof that they know you can actually do it, and you've demonstrated that you actually have the ability to solve that particular problem with other prospects that you've worked with before in the past. So you need to be armed to be able to talk about the particular problems that you get most inside of your sales process, to be able to just crush that limiting belief, but it has to happen before you ever get down to the end of the close. Okay, so number 5 would be trust or validation. They just may not trust you. They just may not believe that you actually can solve this particular problem or service. This really boils down to 1, creating impeccable rapport with a prospect, 2, coaching or leading them through the process, the fact that you have the authority and experience to be able to do that by sharing other examples of prospects that you've worked with, and really helping them to pinpoint their particular problem. So oftentimes inside of a sales process, the best sells are typically when there's a bit of a conflict going on between the two of you throughout the process. And what I mean by that is not necessarily arguing, but when you see things in the prospect, limiting beliefs, or unsure that you actually you can solve the particular problem that they have, you have to be able to confront that. You have to be able to address that. You have to be able to show examples of people that you've worked with before in the past, and you really have to hit that head on and establish the fact that you are by far the organization or person or coach or business that can help them to solve that particular problem. Because if they don't trust you, or they're unsure, you have to establish that level of trust, because trust speeds through deals faster than anything. So handle that potential objection as an obstacle up front, And there's a number of other ways to be able to do that, which we'll dive into on other trainings as well. Okay, so the sixth obstacle, sometimes I've come across this and it's fairly common. It's actually their own internal belief system that they can solve the particular problem. They're unsure of themselves. They're unsure that they have the time. They're unsure that they have the technical capability. They're unsure that they'll actually succeed with it. So your job, your responsibility is to really actually in the sales process to coach them through those limiting beliefs and help them to come to a logical and an emotional state where they realize that A, the timing is actually perfect, and B, through your processes, as they do their side, you will do yours, and you'll help them to be able to overcome that by, once again, continuing to establish that level of trust. It has to be addressed inside of the sales process when you're going through find out and goal setting. It needs to be addressed up front. And the last one, number 7, oftentimes is just plain fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear is just simply something that somebody is trying to do, but they've never actually been able to accomplish before. So oftentimes fear could do a couple different things to prospect. It'll either motivate them or it'll either paralyze them. One of the best things that I like to do, especially if I'm selling some sort of services, to help them to recognize that the current situation that they're in, because I've done a great job at understanding them and the prospect's needs and their actual wants, and understanding the timing gap. So in other words, if they wake up in 2 years and their business is still stuck in the same situation, let's say you're selling plumbing services or you're working with plumbers and you're providing leads for them or showing them how to be able to generate obviously more business. Things are obvious, things are tight and I've never invested into myself and the reality is you just help them recognize that, hey, listen, if you continue to do the exact same thing that you're doing and you wake up in 5 years and your business is still in the exact same situation, what's scarier? The unknown of investing into yourself and actually putting one foot in front of the other and solving the problem, or being stuck in the same situation. And about 99.9% of the time, if they've actually jumped on the phone with you, they know that the destination is actually better. They just need that extra hand holding, helping them to overcome that fear, those limiting beliefs, and promise if you'll address those obstacles before you actually get down to the end of the close, you're gonna see your closing ratio skyrocket and you're going to see your team completely transform your entire sales process. So you guys, do me a favor, like the button, subscribe. If you have a comment on one of these particular topics, happy to go into depth on them in the future. So don't be afraid to comment, and we'll see you on future trainings. Thanks, guys.